You're listening to the Scaling Wellness Podcast, the podcast dedicated to sharing the what, why, and how of scaling your wellness practice, as well as sharing inspiring stories of how others did it themselves. I'm your host, DJ Turner, author, agency owner, houseplant lover, and your go-to guy for scaling your wellness practice. If you're looking for tips on how to grow your team, book more clients, and get out of the day-to-day in your practice, you've come to the right place. Now sit back, relax, and let's get into the episode. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Scaling Wellness Podcast. Today's episode, I'm sitting down with Sharon Hwang, who serves as the CEO of the Wellness Center in Denver, Colorado. It's a 9-facility treatment room with over 30 practitioners and administrators providing massage therapy, chiropractic care, mental health, acupuncture, and naturopathic medicine services. Now, Sharon is a Colorado native. She's born in Littleton, and she pursued her undergraduate degree in urban planning from CU Boulder, and then she joined the Peace Corps and lived in Nepal for 2 years, leading a diverse life, and it's where her story starts to get really interesting. She traveled also through India, and she had felt this calling to delve deeper into the health and wellness field, which she did. But during this time, we get into this episode, one of the more emotional stories of what this time in Nepal and India meant to her and what was happening with the Peace Corps and what was going on with her own journey of mental health. I can relate so much. I can look back and see my time in Switzerland, some things, not so much that I did wrong, but how my time in Switzerland affected me so much deeper than I thought it had. Being in another side of the world, kind of away from most people you know and most things that you know, it can take its toll. And Sharon and I get into it in this episode. But not only that, so, she came back to the States. She went back to Colorado. She got her master's in counseling and psychotherapy. She also worked as assistant director for the Wild Oats Wellness Center. And Sharon and her business partner invested in the Wild Oats Wellness Center, eventually transforming it into the nonprofit and for-profit parts of the business that it is today. A really exciting business that is able to deliver really high quality results for their clients and patients. Now, something really interesting as well about Sharon in this episode is she's one of the people who sort of completed the journey, so to speak, going from the practitioner to manager to owner. And we spent a little bit of time talking also outside of the recording about some of the things that she does now, where she is basically hands off. She has implemented the leadership and management team who is taking care of the business, and she's able to now go spend her time, money, and energy doing other things that she's passionate about and cares about. And so I love this episode because getting to see just her story is amazing, and also see where someone can go in the journey of entrepreneurship and the journey of business ownership through this lens of wellness. So we get into that, what led her to shift from the partnership business and how ownership has changed. What did she do when she ended the partnership, as well as that change, how she grew the business to over 30 people, why she decided not to expand and infinitely scale and keep going. And we talk a little bit about her experience with bankruptcy. So this is a really great episode, I think really inspirational. And those of you who are on that journey, figuring out where they want to go next, where they're moving forward, this is going to be especially helpful for you. So without any further ado, here's my episode with Sharon. So let's dive into today's conversation. But what I want to do, as always, is just get some context about you, your business, and what we're going to be talking about today. So to begin, can you just describe your practice as it is today? The team, the space, the services, and really just what the Wellness Center is all about.
So currently we are one facility. We have 9 treatment rooms. We offer massage therapy, chiropractic care, acupuncture, and naturopathic medicine. We have a team of about 30 practitioners and 7 administrators, and we're open 7 days a week.
So I'm curious about you, and actually one question I realized that I like asking that I had kind of left off before, but I'm curious, if we turn back time and we think about late middle school, early high school, this 13 to 15-year-old Sharon, who were you at that time? What were you interested in?
Well, it was a really awkward time, number one. And I think I grew up with a small business. So my parents are both Chinese and they're immigrants. And my mom worked in corporate America for a while and she really disliked it. And so my parents took whatever savings they had and they decided to open a moto photo. So this is when you used to take pictures and get film reels and take those to get processed and then get your pictures processed, right? And so they purchased a 1-hour moto photo, which I grew up with basically from high school into college. And I have 2 sisters, but I'm the middle child and I was at the perfect age to basically help my mom run this small business. And I guess I'm only sharing that because that actually made me not want to be a small business owner because I saw how much my mom had to work and how much we all invested into this small business. And it didn't make a ton of money in my eyes. So I was like, oh gosh, I definitely don't want to go into business for myself. So then when I went to college, my dad was like, you should go in for business. And I was like, oh gosh, no, because I have a natural kind of affinity for it. But I was like, oh, I definitely don't want to go into business. So I went in for architecture and urban planning because I love physical spaces. I love to figure out like what makes spaces interesting and what makes people gather in certain ways. I was just kind of interested in space and architecture. So I went and got my undergrad in architecture and urban planning. And so I guess I always figured that I would be working in a creative field or doing something in corporate America, but that clearly changed in a big way. Does that answer your question, DJ?
It does. And I know I had been doing my research that your life took a different turn that you were interested in. So I want to talk about how the vision for your practice came together. But as I understand, you joined the Peace Corps and had spent some time traveling throughout South Asia. Could you just tell us about what that time was like and how that led you down this path of wellness?
Yeah. So after college, I decided to join the Peace Corps service and I got placed in Nepal, which at the time I literally had to look at a world map because I had no idea where Nepal was, but is situated right in between India and China. And it's where most people know is where Mount Everest is. And I loved the country. I had an amazing 2 years. I actually, it was a little less than 2 years that I was there. And it was probably the toughest time in my life. Still to this day, I will say I've gone through a lot and I'm sure we'll cover it, but I've had to file bankruptcy, but I still reflect on this 2 years in Nepal in the Peace Corps. And it was definitely a super challenging time for me. I was very young. I was in my early 20s. I was very isolated. And long story short, I was starting to get really depressed in Nepal and literally to a point where I couldn't even get out of bed in the morning. And I felt a lot of guilt and shame around this because I'm thinking, here I am, this very privileged American coming to Nepal to help, and I can't even get out of bed. And for me, the way I reflect on it is I was going through like an existential crisis. Like I had no idea of who I was because in America, it's very easy to distract yourself from what's maybe who you are, what's important to you. We kind of live with all of these facades or masks because we're kind of taught that it's a way of functioning in our culture. But in Nepal and the Peace Corps, literally all of those masks are stripped. I have none of my vices. I'm not able to eat what I want to eat. I'm not able to control my environment that I live in. I'm not able to control all the things that I used to give me some semblance of just normalcy and just comfort in my life, like working out, eating a certain food, hanging out with friends, all of these things that kind of make up your life. And I went into a really deep depression. And then, of course, felt all this guilt and shame. So I was in denial about it. And ultimately what happened, DJ, is I was taken to Kathmandu for a medical evaluation. They call it a psychological evaluation. And I always get emotional talking about this even today. They basically were like, yeah, we probably need to send you, you're not psychologically capable of finishing out your service. And so I was preparing to basically leave, like go back to the United States after just a year of service. And I felt pretty devastated by this whole thing. And I remember talking to the nurse and I said, my family is coming in like 2 weeks. Is there any way that I can at least be here when my family arrives and travel with them? And then can I go home after they leave? So the nurse says, well, I'll put in a request to Washington, D.C., but I would be surprised if they would allow that to happen. So I think you should just pack up and your family should cancel their trip. And I was like, okay. So the next day I went in to kind of figure out like when I would be flying home. And the nurse, her name was Debbie. I still remember. Debbie turns to me and she's like, you are never going to believe what happened. And I said, what? She was like, Peace Corps Medical in Washington has decided to allow you to stay, to visit your family, travel with them, and then we'll do an evaluation after. And so I was able to greet my family. My sister came. I took her to my village. But the biggest turning point for me was my father, who I'm quite close to, said we were walking in this meadow in Nepal and he could tell I was hurt and I was hurting, even though I was trying to be very bubbly and I was trying to be the host and pretend everything was fine. My dad just turns to me and he kind of like holds my shoulders and he says, Sharon, and he starts to cry. And he is not a crier. My father, I've only seen him cry once in his life, and that was when my grandfather passed away. He starts crying and he says, listen, if you need to come home, just come home. He's like, you don't have to prove anything. And what happened was a major shift. I literally snapped out of whatever I was going through. And I was like, oh my God, this person, this being loves me so much. He's feeling my pain, right? So anyway, I had this really deep, profound experience with my dad. I suddenly shift. My parents, my whole family, they fly back to the United States. I go back and I talk to Peace Corps Medical and I do another evaluation. And they decide that I'm actually capable of finishing out my service. I would just end a little bit early, 3 months early. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And so I ended up finishing up my service and I traveled to India for 2 months on my own. And for me, that time, it was like, okay, what's next for Sharon? So I had a travel journal and I had no idea what I wanted to do. But in my travel journal, I started writing. I started talking about opening some type of wellness center that helped people grow, live better lives, and just become a better person. And it was because of this experience that I'd gone through in the Peace Corps, like, because I was like, I want to give what I experienced to other people. And I don't even know exactly if I knew what that looked like. But in my travel journal, I had written out, okay, I want to do a wellness center. I want treatment rooms. I want massage. I want psychotherapy. I want acupuncture. I want a lending library, all of this. So I wrote this in my journal and then I come home to Colorado and, I don't have any money. Clearly from my experience of running a small business with my parents, I was like, I don't really want to do a small business. So I kind of just tucked this vision away. Like I just didn't really know what to do with it. So then I started looking for a job and I started looking for a job actually in my field, my degree in architecture and urban planning. And I went to go make copies of my resume. And next to Kinko's copies, which was in Boulder at the time, there was this place called the Wild Oats Wellness Center. And I was like, oh, I wonder what that is. It's just 2 stores down. I walk in and I literally was like, this is what I wrote in my travel journal. They had a library of like all these great self-help books and inspirational personal books. They had psychotherapy. They had acupuncture, massage, chiropractic care. I think they had an Ayurvedic doctor and they had 5 treatment rooms and they were a nonprofit wellness center. And I literally was like, I'm going to get a job here. I'm like, I met the director and I said, I don't care what I do. I was like, I will scrub your toilets. I will clean. I will answer the phones. I just want to work here. And so she ended up hiring me to work the front desk. And at that point, my parents were thinking I would never leave their basement. And I ended up working there for 2 years. And in that time, I also pursued a master's degree in counseling and psychotherapy because I thought maybe I would become a counselor myself, a practitioner. So then after the 2 years, I worked my way up from an admin upwards to an assistant director. So I started managing. There were 2 locations, a Boulder and a Denver location. So I was managing both. And then basically, long story short, was Wild Oats was priming their company to be sold. So in the natural health industry, Wild Oats was a small natural grocers in Colorado, founded by Colorado founders. they were getting ready to sell. So they decided that they did not want to run these nonprofit wellness centers anymore because they were losing money. They were in the red. So Libby Cook, who was one of the founders of Wild Oats and the founder of the Wild Oats Wellness Center, said, we're shutting these down. They're not profitable. We're changing the way things are done. And so I had two business partners at the time approached Libby and said, hey, can we run the Denver location? Are you willing to, just give us all the assets and we'll honor all the gift cards that are sold? And Libby was like, yes, absolutely. She was like, let me write a new lease because Wild Oats owns the building that I'm currently in and still am in. And we basically got a business for no money. And when I say no money, I also say it was not a business that was making money either, right? So we really just got all the assets, and myself, and I had two partners at the time. The third partner dropped off fairly quickly. Like within the first month, she was like, this is too much for me. So then it was myself and Sherry, who was my partner. And we took the first year and we converted it from a nonprofit to a for-profit wellness center. Changed our pricing, changed our structure. And that's essentially how we started. That was a lot, DJ.
I appreciate you going in and sharing that. It makes me think, I don't know if I've ever talked about it on the podcast or really even shared it with a lot of people besides close friends. I had a similar sensation when I first moved to Switzerland, because in my head, it's like, oh man, I'm leaving the country. Long distance with my partner was like, we're finally closing the gap when we get to leave together. And I moved to this place where that was also a change for me business wise. So like the month before I move, bank account is very happy, very flush. I move, everything changes. And then I'm in this foreign land that I would come to learn later as I got to see more parts of Europe. Some things that I thought were very European were actually just specifically Swiss. The country's quite closed off for being like geographically near the center. And so like not being able to find things I was used to, the language is very difficult. If you learn textbook German, that's not what they speak at all on the streets. You're instantly a foreigner and very difficult to talk to people. And I understand the sensation of like, you're someplace foreign. You should be really happy that you're in this place foreign. You look around, you're like, what is wrong? This doesn't feel good. I feel awful. What is happening here? So I've been through it for a similar experience like that. And I really appreciate you sharing it. And so you've come back to the United States, you now and have bought out this business. And I want to get into what some of those pieces have been like for you and some of the day to day. Something I'm really interested about is I have a lot of stories on this podcast where probably most common is someone who starts as a massage therapist, comes in and works their way up. Sometimes they buy another business, but I'm always interested in those stories of kind of saying, okay, we've gone somewhat around this route to ownership. Not quite, because you worked your way up through Wild Oats. And where I want to start is the first year of business. It's very easy to look at everything today, big team, things look really, really well, but you purchase a nonprofit that wasn't making money. What was that first year like? So what assets did you have in that first year, and just what were you focused on?
So yeah, that first year, my business partner and I did not take a salary. And, our assets were really just our labor and then just the massage tables, really, ultimately. And then, of course, our clients that we had that we were slowly building. So yeah, it was a bit slow going, but I still lived at home at the time. So it made it relatively easier. And my partner had a husband that could support her. So we were able to work for free while we built the business.
Can you walk us through a little bit of the, I guess, major decisions, milestones, big pushes, those sorts of things from you've taken over this business, you've gone through, you've bought out your partners, just the highlight reel to kind of fill us in on some of those major moments over the past almost 20 years?
Yeah. So at about year 3, we were poised to expand. We had started with 5 treatment rooms and we were ready to go up to 7 or 8 rooms at that time. And my business partner was in a very different phase of her life than I was. She was getting ready. She had a young child, I believe, at the time, and was very focused on motherhood. And I was in my 20s, single, and was willing to put a lot of time into the business. It was apparent that things were not going to be equitable as we moved into this expansion mode, that I would potentially be doing most of the work. And I really wanted a partner that was going to be able to do the same amount of work that I was going to be investing ultimately. And partnerships are very tricky, as I'm sure a lot of your clients know. They're a lot like marriages. Things can get very tricky. Things can get emotional. When there's money involved, their egos get involved, and it just gets really hard. I recommend for anyone starting a business partnership, have that buy-sell agreement in place before you have any problems. But for Sherry and I, what we decided is I knew that buying a partner out is a very tricky thing. So I knew that I had to be able to walk away from the business. I couldn't say, hey, Sherry, you just need to sell your share. And to me, I needed to be able to say, listen, I'm willing to sell my shares to you and you can take over the business, and vice versa. Because I was ready to separate from the partnership. So I navigated it in such a way, and we weren't really making a ton of money at that point. So the business wasn't worth a great amount of money, but it was still worth something. And so I said, I'm willing to buy you out for this number, and you also can buy me out at this number. So I was willing to walk away for the same number. So it really kind of equalized it. It didn't feel like I was taking advantage or vice versa. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. That's the one milestone. So I bought Sherry out about 3 years into the business. So we started in 2001. This is probably 2004 at this point. And then the next milestone was we expanded. So then I ended up borrowing money and I ended up expanding inside our current location from 5 treatment rooms up to, I believe it was 8 treatment rooms. We moved up. So we built out, moved up to 8 rooms. And then I was focused on growing the business at that point. I think this is like 2005, 2006 is when we did that. So things are going really well at this point. And I have other investors that are approaching me and saying, hey, this is kind of also the time that massage envy hits the market, where it was still really small. It wasn't well known. And they were just starting to franchise. My dates could be slightly off, but it was around then. And I actually looked at buying the area development rights for Colorado, but there was something in my gut, DJ, and when you and I spoke previous to the start of the podcast, you're very intuitive too. And you have these hits that are like, ooh, I have to take a moment and take a step back and really reflect on this. And for me, the Massage Envy brand, the business didn't feel quite right to me. I saw the business opportunity as huge, but the way that they ran the business, the kind of quick massage turnover and the price point, there was just something about it that I didn't feel totally up with. But at the time, I had 2 other investors come and approach me and says, well, if you don't want to work with Massage Envy, how about if we start our own massage franchise and we can model it the way you would want to? So I ended up forming another business, Pure Massage, outside of the wellness center. And we opened, I think maybe in 2006. And we were similar to the Massage Envy franchise model. Our price points were a little bit higher, and we also had more services. So we offered acupuncture. We offered just some alternative services on top of massage. And in 2008, basically, is kind of when that mortgage crisis happened and things took a downturn. And even before that, I was already starting myself personally to feel depressed, low energy. I think it's interesting when you make decisions in your life that are maybe based out of ego versus where your actual path is supposed to go, how your body will kind of fight you over time. And what that means is I had started Pure Massage, and I remember I specifically didn't want to tell my dad about it because in some respects it might not have been the right decision for me at the time, but I didn't want anyone to say no to me. So I kind of made this decision in isolation, but it ultimately was not the right decision for me personally because I ended up burning out. I ended up getting adrenal fatigue from it. I was overworked. I was stressed. And I was kind of at a place where I was in the Peace Corps where I literally could not get out of bed again. Like it was hard for me to motivate myself. And then the 2008, the mortgage crisis happened, and we were just not hitting our numbers the way we needed to with my investors. And what we should have done is we should have just closed the business at that point. But I was like, well, let me see if I can make a go out of it on my own. So I buy my investors out, and then I try to kind of do a second location because I still have the wellness center in tandem with Pure Massage. Long story short, that ended up not working out. I ended up selling basically my assets to a Massage Envy franchise, which is a franchisee, which is ironic. So they opened a Massage Envy franchise. I actually was forced to file bankruptcy because of this business decision that I had made. And at the time, a lot of people were filing bankruptcy. There was still a lot of shame around it, but I had to just really dig deep and say, okay, Sharon, the worst thing that's going to happen is that you're going to lose the wellness center, but you have your health and you can rebuild whatever else you want to do. So it was kind of like a pinnacle moment in my life where I was like, okay, I just have to let go and just let the universe kind of take over at this point. So I filed bankruptcy. And for those that have not filed bankruptcy before, you have to, there's different types. And I filed one where I was able to restructure basically my debts. So I was able to say, okay, I want to keep my assets and I'm willing to negotiate paying back my debt in a certain payment schedule. And so I did, I think it's chapter 8. I should know this, but a chapter 8 bankruptcy. But it was a really dark time in my life, but I pulled through, and amazingly, the person was like, you know what? The wellness center is doing fine. There were not a lot of assets per se that they could buy and sell off because our asset are our people, our services. So for them, it made sense for me to keep the wellness center because that allowed me to continue paying off my debts. I negotiated it down. But I tell people it was one of the best decisions I made because the debt I would have had to keep had I not filed bankruptcy would have crushed me, basically. So yeah, so that happened in 2008. And then basically I went back to just focusing on just my one location, the wellness center, which was doing fine. And then we grew and we added a 9th treatment room a few years back. And my focus has just been solely on the wellness center.
We'll be back with this episode in just a moment. But first, let me ask you a question. Does it ever feel like you're stuck on some sort of business treadmill? Despite all the hard work you put in, it feels like you aren't actually going anywhere. And at first, growing your practice and filling it with clients was everything you ever dreamed of. But now, the day-to-day of your business is starting to almost feel like a never-ending nightmare. You know you love your clients, you maybe even built a team, and you can't imagine giving any of it up, yet at the same time, you feel like you just can't seem to escape. If that sounds like you, I want to offer you an alternative. I like to call it Wellness Practice Freedom. It's a place where your practice gives you more than just money. When you get to this point, you're no longer the main engine in the vehicle, and instead, you finally get to act like the driver. And most importantly, you'll be in a place where you can work as little or as much as you'd like, because you know that your practice is built in a way that it can thrive without you. Sound interesting? Then I want to invite you to take the journey to achieving wellness practice freedom. During this call, we'll dive into exactly what freedom looks like for you, the changes that you need to take, and what's going to allow you to step back from your business without worrying about your income or everything falling apart. Ready to get started? Then head over to my calendar at www.scalingwellness.com/chat. Again, that's www.scalingwellness.com/chat. Now, let's get back to the episode. I appreciate you going into detail about that. What I want to look at is how things are today and a little bit of what does it take to run a business of your size. It's something that I'm really happy to share stories about and talk about because I think it's kind of difficult. It's easy to find resources for being a franchise owner and for being an owner of, let's say, a solo business or maybe like a team of 5 or less people. What I want to look at is a business of the size. It needs a lot of people. Can you just talk about the structure of your team? So how many practitioners of what sort, and then what other administrative or leadership or other non-practitioner staff that you currently have?
So, one of the biggest gifts, DJ, over the past 20 years is clearly my staff and my practitioners. My director has been with me for 20 years. So she's been with me from the start. And I will tell any business owner that good employees are gold. Like, they are your best asset, and you want to hang on to them for as long as you can. And you really, all my employees are family now. Chris has been with me for 20 years. She's my director. I have an operations director, Josephine, who's been with me for 15 years. And Haley, who's my marketing director, has been with me now, I think, for maybe 7 years, 6 or 7 years. And they really allow me to step away from the business, to not have to invest as much time as I used to. So they're my core management team, is the three of them. And then we have 3 to 4 part-time admins that basically monitor the front desk, answer calls, check clients out, and, greet clients, etc. And then in terms of our modality, this changes over time, and it's clearly due to COVID changed quite a bit. But our biggest modality is massage. So we have about 25 massage therapists. We have 1 chiropractor. We have 1 acupuncturist and 1 naturopathic doctor. We can definitely expand. We used to have 2 chiropractors, but over the summer, our 1 chiropractor had to move back east. It's really hard to find the right person. It just takes time to fill that specific modality we're looking at. So massage is definitely our biggest modality, and our biggest number of team members, for sure, are massage. So we have 25 massage therapists, and they offer a variety from cranial sacral, therapeutic, prenatal, the whole gamut.
And with a team that size, you've got sounds like a really great management and leadership team. How do you view management? Or maybe a better way to phrase it is, so there's a lot of people, you've got layers now because you've got other managers and leaders. What's been your approach to getting people to row the ship in the same direction?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when I reflect on my business the past 20 years, my greatest gift has been my ability to put my ego to the side and really treat my staff and all my practitioners as fellow humans. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but I think having a business, you really have to dive deep into your own personal development, because you come up against so many challenges. And if your ego is involved, if you're wanting to be the person that is on top or whatever, it just doesn't serve your business. It doesn't serve your employees. It doesn't serve your practitioners. So I've always had an open door policy where if there's something that we're not doing right, I want to hear about it. And we're small and resilient enough where we can make changes really quickly and nimbly versus large companies. And I think that was a gift, the ability to be able to listen, to be open-minded, and to also say, I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I don't know. I don't have a master's in business. I say that I have a real life master's degree because I constantly took classes and did mentoring and, did mastermind groups. And that's really what informed me. And I also was led by intuition. I really tapped into my own intuition as to how to run my business. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't make mistakes. I made a ton of mistakes, but I tell people, I was like, consider those your learning curve, and that you would invest in an MBA. And this is way cheaper to make mistakes with your business. So yeah, did that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of those things that isn't discussed a lot is just when a massage business or really any business is small, it's a handful of people, there can be a focus of just having still focused on the task. But as an organization gets large, like I found the magic number seems to be around 8 in most businesses, or at least most, let's say bodywork based businesses, somewhere between 7 and 10, that like all of a sudden having to keep track of that many people and then all of their clients and all of these things totally just changes things. And then as an owner, the relationship from I make sure all the clients are taken care of really shifts to I have people who make sure the clients are taken care of, but I really need to make sure my team is taken care of. And so as you've gone throughout your journey of growth, have you noticed any plateaus? I find that these transition points, these sticking points are some of the areas where we learn the most. Have there been any that come to mind? And if so, how did you get over them?
Plateau points. I don't know. I think there's nothing really that jumps out at me specifically. I think it's really important to stay interested and motivated and constantly be learning, just so you keep things fresh. Even as a practitioner, I say, if you want to maintain longevity in the industry, you definitely want to make sure that you keep learning new things, because the industry is big, and also if you do the same thing as a massage therapist, you're going to be more prone to injury and burnout. So you really want to keep things fresh for all my practitioners and my administrative staff. Clearly, COVID was a very challenging time for everyone. I mean, no one ever expected us to be shutting our doors. And coming back from COVID has been, as you know, DJ, because I know you talk a lot about this now, is that we really need to focus on the practitioner. What are the practitioners and staff needing? Because all of us, to some degree, are on the verge of burning out or just emotionally tapped. Things that we used to do pre-COVID, work, an 8-hour day, is just much more challenging now for many people. And I find that massage therapists that used to be able to work a solid, 20 hours of hands-on, really 15 is more of a stretch for them now. It's really changing. And so I think part of being successful is embracing that change and adjusting your schedule to fit massage therapists' needs or your therapist needs in general. And because my biggest concern right now is just making sure all of my therapists stay healthy. Because as you know, emotionally and physically, it's really hard to find good therapists out there. This is a huge challenge for our industry. And so every therapist I have, I want to make sure that they're not burning out, that they're going to be in this industry, not for just 2, 3, 5 years. I want them to be in the industry for 15, 20 years. I have some therapists that have been with me for over 10 years, which I am really proud of, because they've been able to take care of themselves, make the money they need, and thrive doing something that they love and continue to love. I think that's an anomaly. I think a lot of therapists burn out within 3 to 5 years, unfortunately. And once again, I think it's a problem we all should be concerned with, because how are we going to build businesses when you're constantly turning over therapists after 2 or 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, I think it's something that the pandemic has changed everything. And I can remember maybe it was like June or July when it was like, oh, this is more than just 2 weeks. This is going to be something for a while. I remember it was in the villa with the red paint that had the best location, but a weird red and black bachelor paint job. I just remember thinking, okay, so everyone who is on the other side of this is going to be seeing everything different. How we approach business, how we're thinking about people, how we're thinking about everything is going to be, I don't know what it's going to be, but I know it's going to be very different. And we can start to see like the things that were, I wouldn't say in a good or bad way, things that were okay prior to 2020 are not anymore, and really having to go and change it and look at things in a new way. And so when you think about everything that you've been through and everything you've been able to accomplish, what would you say has been your recipe for success, or at least a few key ingredients?
Well, I definitely think trusting your gut and your intuition when you're making big decisions is huge. I also think our culture promotes big, multiple locations, being very wealthy. And for me, I've really come to, I really just enjoy my one location. I enjoy my team. I enjoy, at this point in my life, the lifestyle it gives me. And I get asked all the time, oh, do you want to open a second location? The clear answer is no. Sometimes my ego says, oh, you should do that. But for me, I don't want to spread, number one, my energy is too thin. And it also doesn't add anything more to my life. So I think that goes back to listening to your intuition. I also think treating your staff and employees well is super important. Being able to trust them, train them, don't micromanage them. Let them do their thing, empower them. And then that allows you to be able to step away from the business. And when I was younger, I was very much into, what were those books about passive income and stepping away from your business? Gosh, I can't even remember the books anymore. It's been so long, but it's like Who Moved My Cheese, or I don't know those. And so I was really clear. And since I grew up with a small business, my mom was always working there. I did not want that. So I was very conscious about making decisions for my business that slowly over time would remove myself of the day to day. And that's very powerful, because when you create a vision for yourself, things will start aligning towards that vision. And so I knew that I wanted a business that provided passive income that I wasn't going to be working in daily in. And so I always held that vision. And I'm a huge believer of vision boards. And so, yeah, I mean, the 10-year mark, I was able to kind of say, wow, I think I'm achieving all of these things that I wanted to in my business. And now at the 20-year mark, we're going to be 21 years in March. I mean, it's such a gift, really, the business and the community that we've built fulfills me. And it's just a beautiful thing for all the people that work there and the community that we serve.
So it's been a fantastic conversation. I've got a few more quick questions. They don't need to have quick answers. My first one, I understand that you like to spend a lot of time outdoors. As part of my research, we go creep on people's social media. You've got this beautiful photo on your Facebook. I think it's somewhere in Canada now. I forget. When I saw it, looks just like there's this place in central Switzerland called Ozinache, and like it looks very, very similar to that. One of my personal favorites. My question though is, has there been a recent favorite hiking trip or outdoor location that you've just really loved, or is a favorite of yours?
Well, I'm from Colorado, so I love Colorado, but I was in the Canadian Rockies for that picture, DJ. We took my mom to the Canadian Rockies for her 80th birthday, and just as beautiful. So yes, Canadian Rockies, but I think I really love the Maroon Bells in Aspen. We did that over the summer. It's a wonderful hiking area. You can backpack in that area, and it is just gorgeous. And since it's in our backyard, that would be my first pick.
You've got a lot of different interests, I understand, outside of your business, being very active in the community, being active in supporting women, being active in just being a wife and a mother and being with your family. I'm curious, whether personal or professional, what would you say is a current obsession of yours?
I have more recently been obsessed with all of these refugees that are coming to the United States. So in the past year, I've devoted a lot of time towards helping 2 Afghan families resettle here in Colorado. And I'm currently helping these 2 single Hazara Afghan women that have recently come to the United States. For me, the obsession comes from, I think it's a generational thing. I feel like, I don't know if this makes sense, but it's generational work, because when I help these people, I am reminded that my grandparents had to flee China. They had to leave children behind, and they had to leave their home country against their will. And then they eventually resettled to America, had very little money, very little support, and they were able to raise 3 daughters here. So it feels like the work with refugees that I'm doing is paying it forward. So it's very powerful.
It's so funny you mentioned that. I had a conversation, I think just 2 days ago, with my wife. We were talking about some of the differences of, I mean, I am not an immigrant, my family, not immigrants, but something just in the United States we see with Black families, people of color. I mean, also just with immigrants, of like there's a different time span when thinking about not just a decision that affects my life, but what is going to be affecting children and grandchildren and great grandchildren, and these massive shifts that can happen, such as moving to a new country and how that plays out down the line. Now, in your own journey, has there been any resource, a book, a podcast, a course, just something or someone that really stands out as a favorite or been very helpful to you along the way?
And this, I don't necessarily know if it's really supported me in my business, but I'm a huge fan of Marianne Williamson. I have always loved her books, and I think it's just more on a personal level that I'm drawn to her.
And we've covered a lot during this conversation. Are there any final words of advice for our listeners, especially those people who are on that path to building something, buying something, just creating some sort of business that is more than just themselves?
I think my advice would be is stay the course. I think one of my biggest contributors to my success is that I've just owned this location for 20 years, and we've been able to just have that consistency over time. And I have this tendency too, as a business owner, I look for the next shiny thing. So I'm always like, oh, maybe I should move my business, or maybe I should, go into this new business. And that's great. You have to do that for sources of inspiration, but really your bread and butter is just built consistently over time, doing the same things over and over. It's not glamorous. It sounds a little bit boring, but it really is how you build something strong.
Thank you again so much for sitting down here today. If someone wants to learn more about you, your business, what you're up to, or just get connected with you, where's the best place for them to go?
Well, we're located in Glendale, Colorado, which is just south of Cherry Creek. And our website is www.wellnessdenver.com.
Thank you again. And thanks everyone who's watching, listening, however it is you're enjoying this. That's all for this conversation, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.
The Scaling Wellness Podcast is hosted and produced by yours truly, DJ Turner. Administration, guest research, editing, and associate production by Helen C. For highlights and updates, follow us on Instagram at Scaling Wellness. And for more information on how to scale your practice up and get out of the day-to-day, head to www.scalingwellness.com.